Welcome to the Euracnos podcast. My name is Maria Crucera. I'm a service and digital designer at Nightmoves. And I'm here with my colleague Laurens van der Kroten, who is going to talk about facilitating workshops. Hi, Laurens.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm amazed you actually pronounced my name in a proper way in another language different than Dutch.
Yes,
That's quite amazing.
I was a bit concerned about that, so I'm happy you say that. um,
How many times did you try?
I, I won't answer that question, sorry. Well, can you introduce yourself for the audience?
so I'll pronounce my name in complete Dutch is Laurens van der Kruisen. I'm a social psychologist at Nightmove, so we're colleagues, huh? And I have actually a background as a neuroscientist, which is maybe a bit strange, of course, when you're working in a digital world. But I do mainly user research at Night Moves, which makes me a bit also of a digital designer because I do wireframing and I come up with concepts for platforms or websites. And well, also because I'm a social psychologist, I like doing things with regard to group dynamics. So I like facilitating workshops, and in Euracnos, I facilitate very often workshops during consortium meetings, help with the creation of surveys,
Mhm.
and I assist with preparing workshops. So that's a brief introduction of me. I could go on for hours.
Okay, so workshops are a constant part of your job, but let's start from the beginning. Why should a workshop be facilitated?
Why? Well, like if you've ever been to a workshop that wasn't facilitated, then you kind of know that answer. Huh?
Mhm.
It, it's like starting a meeting without an agenda. Very often, like it just becomes very chaotic. It's, I mean, you don't end up with the information that you need. I mean, if you had an initial planning and you didn't agree on it with everybody else in the meeting, then yeah, you just don't arrive at the point where you need to arrive. Everybody at the end sort of feels like I wasted an hour of my time, or in
Mhm.
worst case, like 3 hours of their time.
Mhm.
Um, I've also had like workshops, not ones that I have facilitated, but that I attended that got out of hand. So if you have like these participation meetings for community building and stuff like that,
Mhm.
when politics gets involved, those get out of hand so easily. So it's really, yeah, that's why it's quite important. And just to keep a group focused on the mission at hand. I mean, it's really group dynamics, making sure that the group is very well aligned and that they know this is why we're here and what we're going for and what we need to achieve at the end.
Mhm. I guess it's not only about yeah, organizing some exercises in it. What's the role of the facilitator then in a workshop?
Yeah, it is indeed not just organizing some exercises. Although the Dutch colleagues, they have sometimes like a different kind of view on this. They basically they really like put these physical exercises in, which is also very nice. I don't do that often enough.
Mhm.
The like I would like to do that more, where you just tell people get out of your chair and start like moving around for a bit to get energized. But yeah, I think the definition of what the role of a facilitator is sort of differs according to who you ask. As far as I'm concerned, it's really being a guide who gets you from point A to B in one piece, and with the feeling of satisfaction that that it was meaningful, that what you went through with the group during that workshop, that it was meaningful.
Mhm.
And so what I'll do is I'll try to generally keep the discussion on point, see whether everybody's involved, because sometimes you have people like me who try to dominate a conversation. I do that very way too often. So I have to restrict myself in talking not too much. I mean, we also have a limited time for this podcast, so I need to watch out with that. and get a real feeling of the dynamics within the group. Like some groups, you really just have to motivate. I mean, some of these groups, they don't know why they're there. Nobody really explained them anything about what they could expect. So you really need to stimulate them. Maybe they're afraid to say some things that might sound negative to their employer or
Mm-hmm.
to their bosses or something, or to politicians. So you sometimes have to really stimulate them to get them to answer. Humor works very well in that.
Mm-hmm.
And other groups you really have to just slow down. Like you have the dreamer groups. Those are like very inspirational to work with. They just start dreaming of all of these like very incredible solutions, and then you're just like, yeah, but in the end this is going to have to be built, or something has to come out of this, and it has to be realistic. And so then you have to crush some dreams. That's
Oh,
sometimes the sad part.
sounds very sad.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, you have to be flexible in that sense. You have to feel the group, sort of. Yeah, it's strange. Like before, I was an academic. I worked on a children's oncology department. It's like children with cancer,
Mm-hmm.
where you also learn about a sense of humor, how important humor is. That's really in facilitating things. Yeah, but there they really taught me, like every time you go into the room, just have like a little feeling of what the emotional tone of the room is like.
Mm-hmm.
Are they sad, are they happy? And just start adapting like the conversation from that point on. I've had groups where like meetings where like we just chat before, and then everything you feel is just very natural. And then you have other groups where you feel that there's a tension hanging, and then you sort of know like, oh, it's going to be one of those more difficult meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course you sort of adapt. You just, yeah, have to be.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm from Belgium. I'm a big like, I always say that I have to pull like a Jean-Claude Van Damme, that I have to do like a big spread, like just be that flexible sometimes.
Yeah, I guess that there's a lot of flexibility to deal with, and because you don't know what the group is gonna be or how they're gonna react to the workshop that day, it must be really difficult to prepare the workshop in advance. How do you do that? How do you prepare a workshop?
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying there, that it's difficult to sort of see what kind of group you have. Uh, Funnily, I always sort of start maybe with a joke. For instance, when I start a workshop and I see how they react to that. If they don't react, then I know I'm in trouble. So, but when I'm sort of sitting behind my desk and I'm thinking like, okay, I have to start preparing a workshop, the first thing I look for is the goal of the workshop. I mean, what kind of goal do I want to achieve with this workshop?
Mm-hmm.
Do I want to know more about a specific topic or a problem? Because very often the participants you will have, they tend to be experts in something, or they really have valuable information. So do I want to crowdsource that information from them?
Mm-hmm.
So do I want to see, for instance, how they experience a specific problem, for instance, within agriculture, the way that they have to fix, for instance, some kind of machinery. Is that something that I need to know a lot more about? How they experience that? What are the issues that they run into?
Mm-hmm.
Or do I see them really as fellow creators, fellow designers, and they can come up with very good ideas to solve a problem because they know the practical implications of different kinds of solutions. So they can also validate a lot of concepts and ideas. I mean, we can come up as designers with, wow, we invent a new kind of tractor, but
Mm-hmm.
they will immediately say like, oh, I'm never going to ride that
Yeah.
because of that, and that.
Yeah, they have all the
So
knowledge in it.
indeed.
Mm-hmm.
So the goal is really something that is very important to
Mm-hmm.
just narrow that down, what you want, and in that sense your approach will differ. Um, on the other hand, I mean, what I notice very often in the consortium is that there will be a question that people want to see answered, and um, I mean, you need to see whether the question that is asked to participants is clear to them. I mean, whether the answer that you expect from to that question, whether that actually is linked very well to each other. Sometimes you can have questions where you answer, like you ask them to participants and you sort of feel like they they didn't understand this very well, so
Mm-hmm.
you kind of have to imagine what kind of answer you would get for a specific question.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, like mind reading is very handy, and I know I put that on my resume when I applied at Night Moves. I said I can also do mind reading.
It's
That was a
good.
bit of a joke. I can't. but
Okay.
uh, but it's handy if you can sort of imagine, like, okay, this is the kind of answer that I would get to a question. That's quite
Yeah.
handy.
It's like
But online
anticipating a
is
bit.
difficult.
It's not really mind
Yeah.
reading. Yeah, I can. How do you deal with that online? Because I guess it's not the same
the
to do it through a screen.
No, because like generally you sort of look at the body language for
Yeah.
people. If you ask them a question and you sort of see them sort of frowning, or you see them sort of looking at each other like, what the hell is this guy just saying?
Mhm. Mhm.
then then you know, okay, the question I just asked didn't make sense. So one of the
Mhm.
things that you can do is you just, before going into the workshop, you discuss the question with a lot of people. You sort of see how they would ask it or how they would answer it.
Mhm.
And that's actually a handy one. So you user test the question and the topic of the workshop. So sparring with somebody is the handiest thing you can
Yeah.
do. And even online, it is possible. It's
Mhm.
just, yeah, I mean, preparation is key here.
Mhm.
So yeah. And I mean, for me, what I often do is just I work backwards.
Uh-huh.
So I just ask people, don't present me the question, but just present me the kind of answer that you're looking for. And I don't want to then manipulate people into answering, but very often you have to then determine a bit the scope of the question, because sometimes they ask a question that's way too broad, and then I'm thinking like it will take us like 3 hours to get to the answer that you want. So if we ask the question in this way or in this way, is that okay for you as well? And then they're like, yeah, okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. So working backwards from the kind of information that you actually need
Mhm.
to continue, for instance, in a project, that is a really really handy one. And I mean, the other thing is also the moment that you've defined that question, you have to make sure that it's asked in the right way. So are all of these terms understandable? I was talking about user testing the question. It's in essence that is what you do. I mean, as a psychologist, I know that not everybody sees the world the way that I see it. Actually, only me sees the world the way that I see it.
Mhm.
So I have to kind of check with other people how they see a question, how they understand specific terms. I mean, if I'm asking if I'm asking a question about a research related topic to a farmer who doesn't understand that kind of language, then I mean, then I'm not going to get the answer that I need. So I really need to pay attention to what I need to provide as additional context information. I mean, sometimes I can just ask like a simple question, but I need to scope the question out a bit more and say like, okay, I mean it in this way and in this way.
Mhm.
Um, and very often I like the most common thing that I see is people asking like three or two questions in one question, and then you have participants looking at each other like, wait, which question am I supposed to answer now? So then you sort of have to discuss with people, can't we just split it up in a couple of different questions?
Mhm.
And then we sort of get from this question to that question. It's what you like very often you call double barreled questions. It's when you really have like I'm trying to find an example. Uh, yeah, I can't come up with an example right now.
It's
That's
okay.
that's how much I try to avoid them. So I mean, yeah. And the reason why it's really important to avoid them is because very often participants, they might be very unclear on how to react. I mean, you have like you, the facilitator is sometimes really seen as the expert, as the person in charge, the authority figure like in a group.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is that participants are not always so vocal about saying like, well, I don't understand the question, or they start like just giving you an answer that doesn't really fit, and
Mm-hmm.
then you're wasting your time, their time, and you're not coming over as a very competent person, or the whole situation just feels very awkward at
Yeah.
that point in time.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, you don't want to waste anyone's time on a workshop. Um, what would you say it's the right length for a workshop? Speaking about time.
So, well, there's no real straight answer. It kind of depends on the topic of the workshop, the like if it's like a heavy topic or not, how like the kind of participants that you have, if they're really experts and they really need to say a lot, then you also need to give them that time to say quite a bit. um, it also depends on how much experience they have with workshops. People don't
Mm-hmm.
realize this, but workshops can really be very heavy. I mean, they can really be very exhausting. And so you need to make sure that they're not too long. But very often, these workshops also happen in a context. I mean, they happen alongside other workshops that people need to attend.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's also, I mean, now with COVID, what you sort of notice is most of these workshops are done sitting behind a laptop, while you and I both know, like when you do a workshop in a physical room and you're standing up and you can walk around, it's completely different.
Mm-hmm.
So it, yeah, that those are some key factors to determine how long like a workshop has to be. But the main thing is also that just thinking, how long do you think it needs to be? You kind of like can immediately say, okay, for this kind of topic we'll need at least like an hour, or we'll need at least 2 hours for this, simply because you feel that it will generate a lot of discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, these long workshops, I'm on the one hand, the time is really relative when it comes to workshops. Huh? I mean, if you have these long ones of like 3 hours or sometimes of a day, you split them up also with some breaks, because I mean, people have to go to the toilet, people have to smoke, specifically the smokers. I mean, if you don't allow them to sort of go out and have a cigarette, then like you can really feel the tension building up.
Mm-hmm.
And the more tired that they get, or the more like sort of tense they get, the less interaction you get, or the less constructive interaction you get.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very important to pay attention to. Like, you need to look at the energy that your participants have, and also there be very flexible. If you notice like, okay, they're really like there's not a lot of useful information coming out of this anymore, maybe we need to move on to something a bit lighter. And that's really important when you have workshops over several days, like we have in Euracnos. We have these consortium meetings which are over like 3 days. And I mean, you know that at the end of day two, people are really already quite exhausted because of all the work that they need to do. So, and yeah, I mean, then it's not simply that, but I mean, everybody who participates in a workshop generally has a bunch of work that they have to set aside to take part in that workshop.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to be aware of that it's for some people really a strain on their schedule, and that it's just something that you have to be emphatic for. That
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, for them it's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
um,
It's part of
but
their work
like
as
I
well.
said,
Yeah.
yeah, if you have, if their employer is very well aware of that, then that's super handy.
Mm-hmm.
But if their employer is not aware of that, then you have stressed out participants in a workshop, and you need to really take care of your participants as well. I mean,
Mhm.
they're the very valuable asset of the workshop. And to that extent, it's very important that what they're doing there is relevant to them, that they have the feeling that it is really relevant for them. And there you sort of see that if it is relevant to them, then even a heavy topic. I once had to ask people about burnouts they experienced in work. And so a lot of these people came during an evening. So for a workshop of 3 hours, they came, and the workshop involved them telling their story. And after 3 hours, I mean, there were like very emotional moments during the workshop. So it was really emotionally also very heavy
Mhm.
after a day of work. But after 3 hours, everybody was like, "Oh wow, 3 hours have passed already. Like, is this over? Like, I don't want it to be over."
Oh,
So there, you really notice that it can be very relative.
yeah.
So yeah.
I guess that's like a compliment for you as facilitator if time goes so quickly for the participants and they don't even notice. But how do you make sure that there's a good flow in the workshop? How do you create this feeling for them to go so quickly through these 3 hours?
Yeah, uh, I would love to say that you can have some guidelines and that solves it all, but experience is really going to help you out a lot. And because it's basically also the way that your personality sort of shows itself during a workshop.
Mm-hmm.
I myself, I'm going to make a lot of jokes, and I'm going to try and make things light, because I know that the moment that people are laughing, their defense mechanisms are sort of down to a certain extent, and then you get like a lot of valuable information. So during user tests and stuff like that, I really make a lot of jokes sometimes, and then they start really ranting on what they see on a website or something, and then I know that that is the information that I want. So the humor plays an important role in
Mm-hmm.
that, but knowing yourself is very important. uh, the main thing, I mean, just open with an opening exercise. I mean, you get to know the participants, you sort of get to know the feeling in the room through that as well. It has to be fun, it has to be light. Sometimes, like for the Eurachnos workshop, like I asked, one of the questions was, do you like beer or wine? And we have a thematic network that is on wine, and we have French people who are like, of course we are wine. And then you have other people like the Belgian people. They don't want to admit that they might also like wine, so they're like, well, I'm sort of in between. I cannot choose between beer and wine. So you get like this very light conversation in the beginning, which is very good.
Mm-hmm.
And then depending on the goal of the workshop, you can sort of move into very specific things quite fast. But the goal is always sort of to move from a broad perspective to a more specific, like narrow perspective, so that you make sure that you're not missing out on anything.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it, that's really something that I try to do. The other way around is sometimes just very strange. If you go from very specific to a lot broader, then that just doesn't feel right. I mean, I can advise people to try it sometimes, but that's, yeah, to me it has never felt right.
Mm-hmm.
And very important is also just to end a workshop. Like, you do it in a structured way. It's not simply like, hey, okay, we got the information we wanted, thank you guys, bye. um, like, you just ask them for some feedback, or you at least provide them with a summary, where you paraphrase what you learned, what you've heard over the day.
Mm-hmm.
um, Potentially you've asked some questions in the beginning, like, okay, what are your expectations for the workshop? And then you ask in the end, did you have the feeling that we met these expectations? Did this go well?
Mm-hmm.
So that's very important. And then maybe like another guideline is really to just see how fast your group can go. Like, depending on, like we were talking about the length of a workshop,
Mm-hmm.
um, very early on you can sort of detect how fast a group can go. Whether the dynamics in the group are good. If you have, like, some of those groups can be very hostile towards each other. And I'm not talking about the Arachnos groups. but you specifically like public participation tracks and stuff like that. There
Mhm.
can be a lot of hostility, and then you know that you're not going to go very fast with a group like that. But with other groups, you're sort of, you see them like super excited to start moving, and then you know, like, okay, here we can turn up the tempo, and after a couple of ideas, like a couple of minutes, you have like the idea of how far you can go with a group. So that's quite handy.
Mhm. Yeah. As a last question, Lawrence, what do you do when something goes wrong or something unexpected happens?
Yeah, because that sometimes happens.
Yeah, often happens,
Yeah,
I
and
would
that's
say.
not. Yeah, it happens actually more often than you would like to. It's like you prepare a workshop for 3 hours, and then like it starts out with like you've prepared something for 3 hours, and it's really a very tight schedule. So that's maybe another tip: don't make the schedule too tight, because the moment something goes wrong, like you have no space, no leniency to adapt anything.
Hmm.
But I mean, you come into a room and the projector is not working, while most of the stuff that you are going to do involves a presentation, and you're not good at drawing stuff. I'm not good at drawing stuff, so uh, I mean, you are, so you could do it possibly without a presentation, but I
Well,
can't. So I would then ask, like, Maria, can you come in and draw all of these slides that I had prepared? So
save the workshop. Yeah.
um, yeah, come and save my workshop. So collaboration is very important.
Hmm.
But I mean, if half of your participants show up too late, and that happens very often, or at least a couple of participants show up too late, and you start, either then you need to decide, okay, am I going to start the workshop already? Am I going to wait? Or, like, if I wait, then they miss the introduction, or how do I deal with that? uh, some of, like, sometimes you just have like a participant who receives like some very bad news, and then it sort of ruins the constructive atmosphere that is in the group.
Hmm.
So
That's a
that's something
tough
that
one.
you yeah, like, do you go on then, or how do you go on?
Hmm.
um, but also, like, I've had workshops where I received incorrect information in the beginning, and then you prepare everything and you arrive there, it's like, oh no, that's really not what it's about, and then it's like, oh, beep, I need to change this. But the most important advice there is to remain calm. I mean, you have at your disposal very often a group of people for with a lot of knowledge on the topic
Hmm.
for a specific amount of time. So it's important that you give them that message, that they're very important to you, that you don't want to simply cancel the workshop in one go, because I think that's always the first thought in a lot of facilitators' heads, like, oh, we need to cancel the workshop. But I mean, a lot of these people, specifically, well, when it's like a physical workshop, they traveled to get there, so you don't want to cancel the workshop. um, the thing that I do then is I take a small break. Also, like, when somebody has received some very bad news, I just go and talk to them, and I see what is going on. I mean, for me, facilitation is a bit like group therapy in any case.
Hmm.
So that then I just go into a brief conversation with that person and say, like, okay, is everything okay? Do you feel like continuing, or like, it's completely understandable that you can't continue for the moment.
Hmm.
But if you do, like, we really appreciate that, and I mean, we're really happy that you would do it. But I mean, it's all up to you. You don't have to feel obligated and things like that.
Hmm.
Um, and I mean, check with the rest of your participants as well, and with your colleagues. You can draw up a solution for the situation, and just check with everybody, like, is this okay for everybody? Because we don't just want to waste this time. I mean, everybody put in effort for this. Let's just make the best out of this. And they're just listening, observing, and remaining calm, like, not making the wrong joke at the wrong moment is also very important at that point in time. So that's where experience is going to be really like your biggest help when you have to deal with those kinds of situations.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that you always hope it doesn't go wrong, but as a good facilitator, I think you just need to have a couple of those situations and know that you're a good facilitator and you're gonna make it out of there. So just stay positive and make the best of it, and that generally helps. I've never known it to really fail in that way.
Mm-hmm. All right, Lawrence. I'm afraid we're running out of time, but thank you so much for sharing your experience and some advice with us. Um, yeah, that
Yeah,
was
and
it.
thank you for
Thank
asking all of those questions. Yeah.
My pleasure.
So yeah, bye to everybody.
Bye. Have a nice day.
The Arachnis project has received funding from the European Union's Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Programme under Grant Agreement number 817863.
Royalty-free music from Ben Sound.